The sound of drawers slamming shut echoed through the bedroom like gunshots in the quiet evening air. Simone sat frozen on the edge of their king-sized bed, watching her husband of 8 years stuff his expensive suits into leather suitcases with the urgency of a man escaping a burning building. Each piece of clothing that disappeared into those bags felt like another piece of their life together being erased. "You don't have to pack everything tonight, James," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been saying his name wrong all evening, making it sound like a question instead of a statement. Like she was asking permission to still call him her husband. James didn't look up from his packing. His jaw was set in that stubborn way she remembered from their early fights about money, back when they were young and broke and thought love could fix everything. "I want to get this done. Catherine is expecting me." Catherine. The name hit Simone like a slap every time he said it. Catherine Williams, the wealthy widow who owned half the restaurants in downtown and drove a car that cost more than most people's houses. Catherine, who had somehow stolen her husband's heart and his loyalty in the span of 6 months. "What about your job?" Simone asked, grasping for any reason that might make him stay, even though she knew it was pointless. "You can't just walk away from Sterling Industries. You worked so hard to get where you are." James finally looked at her then, and the coldness in his eyes made her stomach drop. This was not the man who used to bring her coffee in bed every morning. This was not the man who had promised to love her through everything. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face. "My job will be fine," he said, folding another shirt with mechanical precision. "Catherine has connections. She knows people who can help me get something better. Something that pays what I'm actually worth." The way he said "what I'm actually worth" made it clear he thought Sterling Industries had been holding him back. Made it clear he thought she had been holding him back too. Simone watched him pack his wedding ring into a small box and place it carefully in his briefcase. The sight of that simple gold band disappearing made something crack inside her chest. They had bought those rings together at a small jewelry store downtown, saving up for months to afford even the simple ones they chose. She had been so proud of them then. So proud of what they represented. "I need you to understand something," James said, straightening up and finally giving her his full attention. "This isn't just about Catherine. This is about me wanting more from my life. I'm 42 years old, Simone. I should have a bigger house, a better car, vacations that don't involve camping in state parks. I should be living like I matter." "You do matter," she said, and hated how desperate she sounded. "You matter to me. That's not enough anymore." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire that had already burned everything down. Simone felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been bending and bending finally snapping clean in two. She had been prepared for him to leave. She had seen it coming for weeks in the way he started working late, the way he stopped laughing at her jokes, the way he looked past her instead of at her when they talked. But she had not been prepared for the cruelty of it. The complete dismissal of everything they had built together. 8 years, she said, more to herself than to him. 8 years of marriage and you're throwing it away for someone you've known for 6 months. "I'm not throwing anything away," James said, zipping up his largest suitcase. "I'm finally choosing to be happy. Catherine makes me feel like the man I was supposed to be. She appreciates what I bring to the relationship. She doesn't make me feel guilty for wanting nice things. I never made you feel guilty for wanting nice things. You didn't have to say anything. It was in the way you looked at me when I talked about getting a better car, or moving to a nicer neighborhood. Like I was being selfish for wanting to improve our situation." Simone stared at him, trying to find some trace of the man she had fallen in love with in college. The man who used to say that as long as they had each other, nothing else mattered. The man who used to make jokes about rich people and their problems. That man seemed to have vanished completely, replaced by someone who measured his worth by the size of his bank account and the opinions of people who had never struggled for anything. "I looked at you that way because we couldn't afford those things," she said. "I was trying to be realistic about our finances." "Our finances?" James repeated, shaking his head. "That's the problem right there. You always acted like we were broke college students. Like we couldn't aspire to anything better. Catherine sees potential in me that you never saw." The accusation hit her like a physical blow. She had seen his potential. She had been the one encouraging him to apply for better positions, to ask for raises, to believe in himself. She had been the one working 2 jobs while he finished his business degree. She had been the one celebrating every promotion, every success, every step forward in his career. How had all of that been forgotten? How had all of that been rewritten in his mind as her holding him back? "I saw your potential every day for 8 years, she said, and this time her voice was stronger. "I was there when you graduated. I was there when you got your first real job. I was there when you got promoted to management. I celebrated all of it with you. You celebrated like it was enough, James said. Like we should just be grateful and stop trying for more. Catherine celebrates like it's just the beginning. He picked up his suitcases and headed for the bedroom door. Simone watched him go, feeling like she was watching a movie about someone else's life. This couldn't be happening to her. This couldn't be the end of everything they had built together. James? She called after him. He stopped in the doorway but didn't turn around. What am I supposed to tell people? What am I supposed to tell your mother? Tell them I finally decided to stop settling. The words followed him down the hallway and out the front door. Simone heard his car start in the driveway, heard him back out and drive away. Then the house fell silent except for the sound of her own breathing and the tick of the clock on the nightstand. She sat there for a long time, staring at the empty closet where his clothes used to hang. The space looked bigger now, like the whole room had expanded to fill the void he left behind. She should cry, she thought. She should be devastated. She should be falling apart. Instead, she felt empty. Hollow. Like someone had reached inside her chest and scooped out everything that used to live there. After a while, she got up and walked to the kitchen. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at the table they had bought together at a garage sale 3 years ago. The table James had always complained about, saying they should get something nicer, something that didn't have scratches in the wood and paint chips on the legs. She looked around the small house they had bought together, at the mismatched furniture they had collected over the years, at the photos on the walls showing their life together. It wasn't much, she knew. It wasn't the kind of house that impressed people or made them feel important. But it had been theirs. It had been home. Now it was just hers. And she had no idea what she was supposed to do with that. The phone rang around 10 o'clock. For a moment, her heart jumped, thinking it might be James calling to say he had made a mistake, that he was coming home. But the caller ID showed her sister's number. "Hey Nina," she answered, trying to sound normal. "Oh honey," Nina said, and Simone could hear in her voice that she already knew. James called Mom. He told her everything. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Simone lied. "No, you're not. I'm coming over." "You don't have to. I'm already in my car." Nina arrived 20 minutes later with ice cream, wine, and the kind of fierce expression that meant she was ready to fight someone. She took one look at Simone sitting at the kitchen table in the same clothes she had been wearing all day, still holding the same cup of cold tea, and wrapped her in a hug that smelled like her perfume and her determination to make everything better. "He's an idiot," Nina said simply. "He's not wrong though," Simone said. "I did hold him back. I was always worried about money, always trying to be practical. Maybe if I had been more supportive of his ambitions." "Stop," Nina said firmly. "Don't you dare blame yourself for this. You supported that man through everything. You worked your butt off while he was in school. You celebrated every success he ever had. You were a good wife, Simone. If he can't see that, then he doesn't deserve you." They sat together in the kitchen, eating ice cream and talking about everything and nothing. Nina told her about work, about her kids, about the neighbor who kept leaving passive-aggressive notes about the height of her grass. Normal things. Life goes on things. Things that reminded Simone that the world was still turning even though hers had stopped. "What are you going to do now?" Nina asked as she was getting ready to leave. "I don't know," Simone admitted. "I guess I'll figure it out." "You will," Nina said. "You're stronger than you think. You always have been." After Nina left, Simone walked through the house, turning off lights and locking doors. In the bedroom, she stared at James's empty side of the closet for a long moment. Then she closed the door and went to sleep alone in their bed for the first time in 8 years. She dreamed about college, about the day she and James first met in their economics class. He had been funny then and kind and full of dreams that had nothing to do with money or status. He had wanted to make a difference in the world. He had wanted to build something meaningful. When she woke up the next morning, she realized that somewhere along the way, they had both forgotten who they used to be. The difference was she still remembered who she wanted to become. Simone woke up to silence. For 8 years, she had been waking up to the sound of James showering or making coffee, or talking on his phone in that quiet voice he used for work calls he didn't want her to hear. The absence of those sounds felt strange, like waking up in a house where all the clocks had stopped. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what she was supposed to do with a Tuesday morning that belonged entirely to her. She had taken the day off work, thinking she would need time to fall apart. But falling apart required energy she didn't seem to have. Eventually she got up and made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, staring at the bank account page she had pulled up but not really seeing the numbers. Their joint account, which would now be just her account. Their mortgage, which would now be just her responsibility. Their life, which was now just her life. The numbers were not as bad as she had expected. They had been careful with money, despite what James said about her being too practical. They had savings. She could make the mortgage payments on her own salary at least for a while. She could figure this out. Her phone buzzed with a text from her boss. "Take all the time you need. We've got everything covered here." Lisa Chin had been more than a boss to Simone over the past 3 years. She had been a mentor, a friend, someone who saw potential in her that Simone sometimes couldn't see in herself. Working as Lisa's executive assistant at Sterling Industries had been the best job Simone had ever had, even if James had always made it sound like she was wasting her talents on someone else's success. Another text came in, this one from her mother. "Your sister told me what happened. Come stay with us for a while." The idea was tempting. Going home to her parents' house, sleeping in her old bedroom, letting her mother cook for her and worry about her like she was still a child. But running away wouldn't solve anything. She was 38 years old. She had a house, a job, a life that existed completely separate from James, even if she had forgotten that for a while. She texted back, "Thank you, but I'm okay here. I'll call you later." Around noon, she forced herself to shower and get dressed. She walked through the house, seeing it differently now that it was only hers. The small living room that James had always complained about suddenly seemed cozy instead of cramped. The kitchen with its old appliances and mismatched dishes felt warm and familiar. The backyard, which James had said was too small for entertaining, looked perfect for the vegetable garden she had always wanted to plant but never had time for. Maybe this house had never been too small. Maybe James had just gotten too big for it. She was pulling weeds from the flower bed by the front door when Mrs. Patterson from next door came over with a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. "I heard about James," the older woman said gently. "I'm sorry, dear." Mrs. Patterson had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. She had watched families move in and out, had seen marriages begin and end, had probably witnessed more human drama than anyone needed to in one lifetime. She didn't ask questions or offer advice. She just handed over the casserole and squeezed Simone's shoulder. "Chicken and rice," she said. "It'll keep in the fridge for a week." "Thank you," Simone said and meant it. That evening, she ate Mrs. Patterson's casserole while watching a movie she had always wanted to see but James had never been interested in. It was a romantic comedy from the 90s, predictable and sweet and exactly what she needed. She laughed at parts that weren't even that funny, and cried during the happy ending, and felt something small and warm unfold in her chest. When the movie was over, she called Nina. "How are you holding up?" her sister asked. "Better than I expected," Simone said, and realized it was true. "I think I'm going to be okay." "Of course you are. You're a survivor." "When did you know that about me?" "Always," Nina said without hesitation. "Even when we were kids. Remember when Dad lost his job and Mom was so worried about money? You were only 12, but you started babysitting and giving all your earnings to Mom. You didn't even think about it. You just saw what needed to be done and did it." Simone had forgotten about that. She had forgotten a lot of things about herself, apparently. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to be honest. Always. Do you think I held James back? Do you think I was too focused on being practical and not supportive enough of his dreams?" Nina was quiet for a long moment. "Simone, you worked 2 jobs while that man finished his degree. You celebrated every promotion he got like it was your own. You never once complained when he wanted to buy something expensive, even when money was tight. You encouraged him to apply for better positions. You were his biggest cheerleader for 8 years. If he can't remember that, it's not because you didn't do enough. It's because he chose to forget. But maybe—" "No maybes," Nina said firmly. "Stop trying to make his choices your fault. He decided to leave. He decided that what you built together wasn't enough for him. That's on him, not on you." After they hung up, Simone sat in the quiet house and thought about what Nina had said. She had been James's biggest cheerleader. She had celebrated his successes, supported his goals, worked extra hours to help pay for his education. She had been a good wife even if he couldn't see that anymore. For the first time since he had left, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt angry. The next morning she went back to work. She walked into the Sterling Industries building with her head up and her shoulders straight, and tried not to think about the fact that James worked on the 7th floor while she worked on the 15th. She tried not to wonder if people knew what had happened, if they were looking at her with pity or curiosity or relief that the drama wasn't their own. Lisa was waiting in her office with coffee and a stack of files that needed attention. "How are you?" Lisa asked, studying Simone's face carefully. "I'm okay," Simone said. Ready to work. Good, Lisa said. Because I have something I want to discuss with you. They spent the morning reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for a board meeting. It was familiar work, comforting in its routine and its demands on her attention. She had always been good at her job, even if James had never seemed particularly impressed by it. She was organized, efficient, good with people. She could handle multiple projects at once and never missed a deadline. Around lunchtime, Lisa closed her office door and sat down across from Simone's desk. I want to talk to you about your future here, she said. My future. You've been my assistant for 3 years and you've been exceptional at it. But I think you're ready for more responsibility. I want to recommend you for the new operations manager position. Simone stared at her. Operations manager? It would mean a significant salary increase. Your own office. Your own assistant. You would be managing a team of 12 people and overseeing 3 major accounts. I don't have a business degree, Simone said automatically. You have something better, Lisa said. You have experience, intelligence, and the respect of everyone in this building. You know how things work here better than most of the managers who do have degrees. The offer felt surreal. Like something that happened to other people, people who were more ambitious or better connected or luckier than she was. Why me? She asked. Because you're the best person for the job, Lisa said simply. And because it's time you started getting credit for how valuable you are to this company. Simone thought about James, about his complaints that she never aspired to anything bigger, never pushed for more. Here was more being offered to her like a gift she hadn't even known she wanted. I'll need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Simone. Lisa leaned forward, her expression serious. Don't let anyone make you believe you're not capable of this. You are. You always have been. That afternoon, Simone found herself standing by the window in Lisa's office, looking down at the city below. From the 15th floor, everything looked small and manageable. The traffic, the people, the problems that seemed so big when you were in the middle of them. She thought about James and his new life with Catherine. She thought about the house that was now entirely hers, the future that was now entirely hers to design. She thought about the girl she had been in college, full of dreams and ambitions she had somehow talked herself out of over the years. Maybe it was time to remember who she had wanted to become, before she had gotten so focused on supporting someone else's dreams that she had forgotten her own. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe and start playing to win. 3 weeks after James left, Simone accepted the operations manager position. Her first day in her new role began with a staff meeting where she would be introduced to the team she would now be leading. She had barely slept the night before, going over her notes and practicing what she would say. The conference room was full when she walked in. 12 faces looked up at her with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical to genuinely welcoming. These were people she had worked with for 3 years, but always as Lisa's assistant, never as their equal. Now she would be their boss. Good morning, everyone, she said, setting her folder on the table. I know this transition might seem unusual and I want to address that right away. I understand that some of you might have questions about my qualifications or wonder why this position wasn't posted externally. Tom Rodriguez, who had been with the company for 15 years, leaned back in his chair. To be honest, yeah, I was wondering about that. Simone had expected this. Tom was good at his job but had a habit of challenging authority, especially when that authority was new or different from what he was used to. That's fair, she said. Here's what I can tell you. I've been working closely with Lisa Chen for 3 years. I've seen every project that's come through this department, managed the scheduling and coordination for most of them, and handled the client communication for several major accounts. I know the systems, I know the clients, and I know what works and what doesn't work in this department. But you don't have a management background, Tom pressed. You're right, I don't. What I have is 3 years of watching how this department functions from a unique perspective. I've seen what managers do well and what they struggle with. I've worked with every client, solved problems that never made it to management level, and kept projects running smoothly behind the scenes. I'm not saying that makes me the perfect candidate, but it does make me someone who understands this department from the ground up. Sarah Kim, one of the project coordinators, spoke up. What's your vision for the department? This was the question Simone had been preparing for. My goal is to make everyone's job easier and more efficient. I've seen how many hours people spend on administrative tasks that could be streamlined. I've seen projects get delayed because of communication gaps that could be prevented. I want to focus on creating systems that let everyone do their best work without unnecessary obstacles. The meeting continued for another hour. Simone answered questions about reporting structures, project timelines, and budget concerns. Some people seemed convinced, others remained skeptical, but everyone was professional. By the end, she felt like she had at least earned the right to prove herself. After the meeting, Sarah lingered behind. "I just wanted to say I think this is great," she said. "You've always been helpful when I needed something, and you know the clients better than anyone. I'm looking forward to working with you." "Thank you," Simone said. "That means a lot." Her first week was a blur of meetings, reports, and learning to navigate the politics of management. She discovered that being in charge meant dealing with personality conflicts, budget constraints, and deadline pressures she had only seen from a distance before. But she also discovered that she was good at it. She could mediate disputes, make decisions under pressure, and motivate people to do their best work. The hardest part was running into James in the elevator or the cafeteria. Sterling Industries was a big company, but not big enough to avoid someone completely. The first time she saw him after her promotion, he did a double take that would have been funny under different circumstances. "Operations manager?" he said, reading the nameplate on her new office door. "That's right," she said, not stopping to chat. How did that happen? The question irritated her. Like he couldn't imagine her being qualified for anything beyond answering phones and scheduling meetings. "I got promoted," she said simply. "But you don't have a business degree?" "No, I don't. Apparently, experience and competence matter more than I thought." She walked away before he could respond, but she heard him talking to someone later in the hallway. "I can't believe they gave Simone a management position. She's never managed anything in her life." The comment stung even though she had expected it. James had never seen her as someone with leadership potential. In his mind, she was the support person, the one who handled details so other people could focus on big picture things. The idea that she might be capable of big picture thinking herself had never occurred to him. But it had occurred to Lisa, and to the executives who had approved her promotion. It had occurred to Sarah and the other team members who started bringing her ideas and asking for her input on projects. It had occurred to the clients who complimented her on how smoothly things were running under her management. Maybe the problem wasn't that she lacked ambition or leadership skills. Maybe the problem was that she had spent 8 years with someone who couldn't see those qualities in her. 2 months into her new position, she got a call from a client she had never worked with directly. Peterson Manufacturing was a mid-sized company that had been having problems with their current project management firm. They wanted to meet with Sterling Industries about taking over their account. "I heard good things about your operations team," Mr. Peterson said during their phone conversation. "Specifically about you. I'd like to set up a meeting." The meeting went well. Better than well. Peterson Manufacturing signed a contract worth more than any single account Simone had managed as Lisa's assistant. When she presented the signed contract to Lisa, her former boss smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose faith in another person had been vindicated. "How does it feel to land your first major client?" Lisa asked. "Terrifying and amazing," Simone admitted. "That's exactly how it should feel." That evening, Simone celebrated by buying herself dinner at a restaurant she had always wanted to try but James had considered too expensive. She sat at a table by herself eating excellent food and reading a book, and felt completely content. She had forgotten what it was like to make choices based purely on what she wanted, without having to consider someone else's preferences or budget concerns or opinions about what kind of places they should be seen in. When she got home, she walked through her house with new eyes. The living room that James had called cramped looked cozy and welcoming. The kitchen with its old appliances was perfect for the elaborate cooking she had started doing on weekends. The backyard had become a garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. This was her space now. Her life. Her choices. She had heard through mutual friends that James and Catherine were living together in a downtown condo that cost 3 times what the mortgage on this house cost. She had heard that he was driving a new car and wearing expensive suits and going to parties with people who owned businesses and investment portfolios. She was happy for him, she realized. Not because she missed him or wanted him back, but because he had gotten what he wanted. He had wanted to feel important and wealthy and impressive. He had wanted a life that looked successful from the outside. He had found that life with Catherine. What surprised her was how little she envied him. The life he was living now looked exhausting to her. All that pressure to maintain an image, to impress people, to prove his worth through external things. She would rather have her quiet house and her garden and her job where she was respected for what she actually contributed. She would rather have a life that was real than one that just looked good. That night, she called Nina to tell her about the Peterson account. "I'm so proud of you," Nina said. "You've really found your stride." "I think I have," Simone agreed. "It's strange. James always said I wasn't ambitious enough, but I think I just wasn't ambitious about the right things." I wasn't trying to impress anyone or make myself look important. I was just trying to do good work. And now you're being rewarded for it. Yeah, it feels good. After they hung up, Simone sat in her living room with a cup of tea, thinking about the path that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been a wife whose husband was dissatisfied with their life together. Now she was a successful manager with her own team, her own clients, and her own vision for the future. The divorce papers had been finalized the week before. She had signed them without sadness or regret, just relief that the legal end matched the emotional end that had happened months earlier. She was officially single now, officially responsible only for herself and her own choices. It should have felt scary. Instead, it felt like freedom. 6 months after her promotion, Simone was managing Sterling Industries' most profitable division. What had started as an operations manager role had expanded into something closer to a vice president position, though her title hadn't officially changed yet. She was overseeing 15 people now, managing 5 major accounts, and had been asked to sit in on executive meetings as a consultant on operational efficiency. The Peterson manufacturing account had been just the beginning. Word had gotten out in the industry about the turnaround in Sterling's operations department, and new clients were calling regularly. Companies that had been frustrated with their current service providers were switching to Sterling specifically because of recommendations about Simone's team. "You're becoming quite the reputation," Lisa said during one of their weekly check-ins. "I heard Jensen Corp is considering switching their entire logistics operation to us." "They're not happy with their current setup," Simone confirmed. "Their project manager left last month and they've been dealing with delays and communication problems ever since. They want to meet next week." That would be a $40 million account. The number still felt unreal to Simone. A year ago, she had been scheduling meetings and taking messages. Now she was negotiating contracts worth more money than she had ever imagined being responsible for. "Are you comfortable handling something that size?" Lisa asked. "Honestly, it's intimidating. But I think we can do it. The team is solid, our systems are working, and we have a track record now." "Good. Because I have some news that might interest you." Lisa closed her office door and sat down across from Simone. "The board has been talking about restructuring the company. They want to create a new position, Senior Vice President of Operations, that would oversee all the operational departments, not just ours." Simone felt her stomach flip. "Are you leaving?" "No, I'm moving up. They're creating a Chief Operating Officer position and they've offered it to me. Which means my current job will be available." "Your current job?" "Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations. It would put you in charge of 4 departments, reporting directly to me and the CEO. Your own executive assistant, company car, expense account. The works." Simone stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. The board was initially hesitant about promoting someone without an MBA, but your results speak for themselves. Revenue in your department is up 60% since you took over. Client retention is at 95%. Employee satisfaction scores are the highest in the company. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." "The salary is $230,000, plus bonuses tied to departmental performance." The number made Simone's head spin. $230,000. That was more than she and James had made combined in their best year together. "When do you need an answer?" "Take your time. A week or 2. "But Simone." Lisa leaned forward. "You've earned this. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." That evening, Simone sat in her backyard with a glass of wine, trying to process what had happened. Executive Vice President. She would be one of the highest-ranking people in the company, responsible for hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. The girl who had worked 2 jobs to put her husband through school, who had been told she wasn't ambitious enough, who had been left for a woman who could offer a more impressive lifestyle, was being offered a position that would make her one of the most powerful people in the industry. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, honey. How are you doing?" "Good. Really good, actually. I got some interesting news today." She told her mother about the promotion offer, about the salary, about the responsibility that came with it. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Your father and I always knew you were capable of great things," she said finally. "We just worried that you were so focused on supporting James that you forgot to support yourself." "I think I did forget for a while." "Well, you remember now. That's what matters." After they hung up, Simone walked through her house, seeing it with new eyes again. With the salary from this new position, she could afford to renovate. She could buy a bigger house if she wanted to. She could travel, invest, do all the things James had accused her of not wanting. But as she looked around at her cozy living room, her well-equipped kitchen, her peaceful bedroom with its view of the garden, she realized she didn't want to change any of it. This house had become truly hers over the past year. It was where she had learned to be alone without being lonely. It was where she had rediscovered who she was when she wasn't trying to be what someone else needed her to be. She would take the promotion. She would accept the responsibility and the salary and the recognition that came with it. But she would stay in this house, with its scratched kitchen table and its mismatched furniture and its garden full of vegetables she had grown herself. James had left her for a woman who could give him a more impressive lifestyle. What he didn't realize was that Simone had been building an impressive life of her own, one that was based on substance rather than appearance. The next week, she had lunch with Nina to discuss the promotion offer. $230,000? Nina nearly choked on her sandwich. Are you kidding me? Plus bonuses. Simone, that's incredible. You have to take it. I'm going to. It's just surreal. A year ago, James was complaining that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I was holding him back from the kind of life he wanted. Now I'm being offered a position that would make me one of the highest paid people either of us knows. Have you heard from him lately? Not directly. But I heard through the grapevine that he and Catherine broke up. Nina raised an eyebrow. Really? Apparently she got tired of supporting him. Turns out having expensive tastes is only attractive when you can afford them yourself. What's he doing now? I don't know and I don't really care. That sounds harsh, but it's true. He made his choice. He chose to leave a life where he was loved and supported for a life where he felt more important. How that worked out for him is his business. You really are over him. Completely, Simone said and realized it was true. She felt no satisfaction in hearing about his breakup with Catherine, no desire to reach out or offer support. James felt like someone she used to know, someone from a different part of her life that she had moved beyond. So when do you start the new job? Next month. Lisa wants me to spend a few weeks transitioning with each department head, learning their operations before I officially take over. This calls for a celebration, Nina said. That weekend, Nina threw a small party at her house. It was just family and a few close friends, but it felt perfect. Simone's parents drove up from their town 2 hours away, beaming with pride as they listened to her describe her new responsibilities. Her father, who had worked construction his whole life, kept shaking his head in amazement. Executive Vice President, he said for the third time. My daughter, the executive. Don't let it go to your head, Dad, Simone laughed. Too late. I'm already planning to brag to everyone at the hardware store. As the evening wound down, Simone found herself on Nina's back porch with her mother, watching the sun set behind the trees. Are you happy? Her mother asked quietly. Yeah, I really am. Good. For a while there, I was worried you had forgotten how to be happy for yourself. I did forget for a while. But I remember now. James never deserved you, her mother said. I probably shouldn't say that, but it's true. He was so focused on what he thought he was missing that he couldn't see what he had. Maybe we just wanted different things, Simone said diplomatically. Maybe. But what you wanted was real. What he wanted was just for show. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of Nina's children playing in the yard and the distant hum of evening traffic. I'm proud of you, her mother said. Not because of the promotion or the money. I'm proud of you for rebuilding your life into something that makes you happy. Thanks, Mom. That means everything to me. The next morning, Simone drove home feeling more content than she had in years. She had work she was good at, a family who loved her, a house that felt like home, and a future that was entirely her own to design. She thought about James briefly, wondering if he was happy with his choices, but the thought didn't linger. She had more important things to focus on now. Like figuring out how to be the best executive vice president Sterling Industries had ever had. 2 months into her new role as executive vice president, Simone was working late on a Thursday evening when she discovered something that would change everything. She had been reviewing budget reports from all 4 departments under her supervision, looking for ways to improve efficiency and reduce costs. The Sterling Industries building was quiet at 8 o'clock, with only security guards and a few dedicated workaholics still around. Simone liked working late sometimes. It gave her uninterrupted time to think and plan without the constant stream of meetings and phone calls that filled her days. She was deep in the financial reports when something caught her attention. There were several payments listed as consulting fees that seemed unusually large and frequent. Each payment was to something called Phoenix Strategic Solutions, $50,000 monthly for the past 2 years. Simone frowned at her computer screen. She had been involved in managing consultant relationships for years, first as Lisa's assistant and now as an executive. She knew all the major consulting firms Sterling Industries worked with. She had never heard of Phoenix Strategic Solutions. She pulled up the vendor database and searched for Phoenix Strategic Solutions. The entry was minimal, just a business address and a contact phone number. No details about what services they provided or who had authorized the contract. Curious now, she accessed the executive expense database. She had authorization to review all departmental spending, but she rarely looked at expenses outside her own divisions. Tonight, something made her dig deeper. The payments to Phoenix Strategic Solutions were authorized from the executive level, specifically from the CEO's office. That was unusual. Most consulting contracts went through department heads and required multiple approvals. For something to be authorized directly from the CEO's office meant it was either highly confidential or involved the highest levels of company strategy. Simone made a note to ask Lisa about it in the morning. As COO, Lisa would know about any major consulting relationships, especially ones that were costing the company $600,000 a year. But when she mentioned it to Lisa the next morning, her former boss looked surprised. Phoenix Strategic Solutions? I've never heard of them. Are you sure the payments are current? According to the database, the most recent payment was 3 weeks ago. Lisa pulled up her own computer and spent several minutes searching through various databases. I don't see any contracts or agreements with that company. No project reports, no deliverables, nothing. That's strange. Could it be a subsidiary of one of our regular consultants? It's possible, but usually those would be listed under the parent company name. Lisa looked troubled. This is odd enough that I think we should bring it to Richard's attention. Richard Brennan was Sterling Industries CEO, a man Simone had met only a few times but who had personally approved her promotion. He was in his early 60s, had built the company from a small consulting firm into a major player in the industry, and was known for being both brilliant and demanding. They scheduled a meeting with him for that afternoon. When they explained what they had found, Richard's expression grew increasingly serious. "Show me exactly what you're looking at," he said. Simone pulled up the payment records on her laptop. Richard studied them carefully, his jaw tightening as he scrolled through the data. "I never authorized these payments," he said finally. "And I've never heard of Phoenix Strategic Solutions." The silence in the room was heavy. If the CEO hadn't authorized payments that were supposedly coming from his office, then someone else had. Someone with enough access to the financial systems to create fake authorizations and process payments without proper oversight. Who has the ability to authorize payments at this level? Lisa asked. Myself, the CFO, and... Richard paused, looking uncomfortable. And my son-in-law. I gave him executive financial authorization last year when he joined the company. Simone felt a chill run down her spine. Richard's son-in-law was David Sterling, the company's vice president of business development. She had met him several times but had never worked directly with him. He was young, ambitious, and had joined the company straight from business school 2 years ago. You think David might be involved in this? Lisa asked carefully. I don't know what to think, Richard said, but I'm going to find out. Can you get me more details about this Phoenix Strategic Solutions? Address, phone number, any other information you can find. Of course, Simone said. And I want this kept confidential for now. If there's some kind of fraud happening, I need to understand the scope before we involve law enforcement or make any accusations. Over the next 3 days, Simone did the most thorough investigation of her career. She traced every payment to Phoenix Strategic Solutions, cross-referenced them with other company expenses, and researched the company itself. What she found was disturbing. Phoenix Strategic Solutions was registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. The phone number went to a voicemail system that had never been set up. The business license was current, but there was no website, no employee records, no evidence that the company had ever provided any actual services to anyone. More troubling, the timing of the payments corresponded almost exactly with David Sterling's access to the financial authorization system. The first payment had been processed 2 weeks after he received his executive privileges. When she presented her findings to Richard, he looked like he had aged 10 years. My daughter's husband has been stealing from my company, he said quietly. We don't know that for certain yet, Lisa said diplomatically. Yes, we do, Richard said. The evidence is clear. David has been creating fake consulting payments and somehow getting that money back to himself. How do you want to handle this? Simone asked. Richard was quiet for a long time, staring out the window of his office at the city below. I need to call my lawyer, he said finally. And I need to figure out how to tell my daughter that her husband is a thief. What about David? Do you want us to confront him? No, not yet. I want to have all the legal pieces in place first. But I want you both to keep investigating. Find out how much money we're talking about total, and see if there are any other suspicious payments or transactions. That weekend, Simone worked from home, going through 3 years of financial records with the thoroughness of an accountant preparing for an audit. She found 2 other consulting companies that showed similar patterns: regular payments, minimal documentation, no clear evidence of services provided. By Sunday evening, she had identified over $2 million in suspicious payments, all authorized through David Sterling's executive access codes. $2 million. Stolen from the company that had given her the opportunity to build a career, that had promoted her based on merit, that had become the foundation of her new life. She thought about James, about his complaints that she wasn't ambitious enough, that she was too focused on playing it safe instead of reaching for more. Here was someone who had reached for more by stealing it from the people who trusted him. The irony wasn't lost on her. James had left her for a woman who could give him a more impressive lifestyle, but he had done it honestly, working within the system even if she didn't respect his choices. David Sterling was living an impressive lifestyle by stealing from his own family's company. She wondered if James would have made the same choices if he had been given the opportunity. She wondered if his dissatisfaction with their modest life would have led him to justify taking what wasn't his. She hoped not. For all his faults, she had never thought of James as dishonest. Selfish maybe. Ungrateful certainly. But not criminal. Monday morning, she presented her complete findings to Richard and Lisa. The numbers were even worse than they had initially thought. Over 3 years, David Sterling had systematically stolen more than $2.5 million from Sterling Industries. I've spoken with our lawyers, Richard said. They're recommending we involve the FBI. This level of financial fraud crosses state lines and involves federal banking regulations. What about your daughter? Lisa asked gently. I told her yesterday, Richard said, and Simone could see the pain in his eyes. She's devastated. She had no idea. She thought David's success was legitimate, that he was just good at his job. Is she standing by him? She says she needs time to process everything. But she's moved back in with us temporarily. I think she knows this marriage is over. Simone felt a pang of sympathy for Richard's daughter. She knew what it was like to discover that the person you trusted most had been living a lie. The difference was that James had been lying to himself as much as to her. David Sterling had been deliberately deceiving everyone around him while stealing from his own family. When will you arrest him? She asked. The FBI wants to build an airtight case first. They're going to monitor his activities for a few more days, make sure they understand the full scope of the fraud before they move. He's still coming to work? He doesn't know we've discovered anything yet. We're acting normal while the investigation continues. The idea of seeing David Sterling in the hallways, watching him go about his normal routine while knowing what he had been doing, made Simone's skin crawl. But she understood the need to let law enforcement handle things properly. Is there anything else you need from me? She asked. Actually, yes, Richard said. The FBI agents handling the case want to interview you. You're the one who discovered the fraud, and your financial analysis is a key part of their evidence. Of course. Whatever you need. As she left Richard's office, Simone thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment. If James hadn't left her, she never would have thrown herself into her work with such dedication. If she hadn't been promoted, she never would have had access to the financial records that revealed the fraud. If she hadn't been working late that Thursday night, she might never have noticed the suspicious payments. In a strange way, James leaving her had led to her uncovering a crime that could have cost Sterling Industries millions more dollars if it had continued undetected. Sometimes life had a sense of justice that was too perfect to be coincidental. The FBI agents who interviewed Simone were professional and thorough. Agent Sarah Chin and Agent Mike Rodriguez spent 3 hours going through her financial analysis, asking detailed questions about how she had uncovered the fraudulent payments and what systems David Sterling had used to hide his theft. Your work here is exceptional, Agent Chin said, reviewing Simone's documentation. You've essentially done half our job for us. The paper trail you've created will be crucial for prosecution. I just followed the numbers, Simone said. Once I saw the pattern, it wasn't hard to trace. Don't sell yourself short, Agent Rodriguez said. Most people would have missed this entirely. The way the payments were structured and authorized, they were designed to blend in with legitimate expenses. It took real skill to spot the inconsistencies. They explained that David Sterling was part of a larger investigation into corporate fraud schemes. Apparently he wasn't working alone. Phoenix Strategic Solutions was connected to a network of fake companies that had been used to steal money from multiple businesses. "We think your Mr. Sterling might be part of an organized fraud ring," Agent Chin explained. "The sophistication of the setup, the way the money was laundered through multiple shell companies, this isn't the work of one person acting alone. How many other companies are involved? We can't give you specific details, but we're looking at potential losses in the tens of millions across multiple firms." The scope of it was staggering. What had started as Simone noticing some unusual consulting fees had uncovered a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. "What happens now?" she asked. "We continue building our case. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial, but that's probably months away. In the meantime, we'd like you to continue monitoring Sterling Industries' financial systems. If you notice any other irregularities, we want to know immediately. Should I be worried about my safety? If David Sterling is part of a criminal organization." Agent Rodriguez shook his head. "He doesn't know you're the one who discovered the fraud. As far as he's concerned, everything is normal. We want to keep it that way until we're ready to make arrests." That was easier said than done. For the next week, Simone had to act normally around David Sterling while knowing he was a criminal who had stolen millions from the company. She saw him in the elevator, in meetings, in the cafeteria, and had to make polite conversation while her skin crawled. David seemed relaxed and confident, joking with colleagues and talking about vacation plans with his wife. Either he was an exceptional actor or he genuinely believed he would never be caught. The hardest part was watching Richard Brennan struggle with the situation. The CEO was trying to run his company normally while dealing with the knowledge that his son-in-law had betrayed his trust and broken his daughter's heart. He looked exhausted and older than his years. "How are you holding up?" Simone asked him during one of their regular meetings. "Some days are better than others," he admitted. "My daughter is staying with us and she's not taking this well. She keeps asking if there might be some mistake, some explanation that would make this all go away." "What do you tell her?" "The truth. That the evidence is overwhelming and there's no innocent explanation for what David has done." Richard rubbed his forehead. "She loved him, you know. Really loved him. This isn't just about the money for her. It's about discovering that the man she married, the man she thought she knew, never really existed." Simone understood that feeling better than most people would. The disorientation of learning that someone you trusted had been living a lie, the way it made you question your own judgment and wonder what else you had missed. "It's not her fault," she said quietly. "I know that. But she doesn't. She keeps blaming herself for not seeing the signs, for not asking more questions about how he was affording their lifestyle." "What kind of lifestyle?" "Expensive. New cars, designer clothes, trips to Europe, a condo that cost more than most people make in 5 years. She thought he was just good with money, that he had made some smart investments. She never suspected he was stealing it." The description reminded Simone of James, of his complaints that their life wasn't impressive enough, that they should have nicer things and live in a better neighborhood. The difference was that James had left to find someone who could give him that lifestyle legitimately. David Sterling had stolen it. "When will the FBI make their move?" she asked. "Soon, I think. They're coordinating with law enforcement in several other cities. They want to arrest everyone involved at the same time so no one can warn the others." 2 days later it happened. Simone was in her office reviewing quarterly reports when she heard shouting from the 7th floor. She looked out her window and saw FBI agents escorting David Sterling out of the building in handcuffs. The entire company seemed to freeze. People gathered by windows and in hallways, whispering and speculating about what was happening. Within an hour, everyone knew that David Sterling had been arrested for fraud. Richard called an all-hands meeting for that afternoon. The auditorium was packed, with employees standing in the aisles and crowding around the doors. The atmosphere was tense, with people worried about their jobs and the company's future. "I want to address the situation with David Sterling directly," Richard began. "This morning, federal agents arrested David on charges related to financial fraud. I want to assure all of you that this was the action of one individual and does not reflect on Sterling Industries as a company or on any of you as employees." He explained that the company was cooperating fully with the investigation and that there would be no impact on operations or employment. He thanked the employee who had discovered the fraud, though he didn't mention Simone by name. "Sterling Industries has been built on trust, integrity, and hard work," he concluded. "One person's betrayal of those values doesn't change who we are or what we stand for. We will get through this together and we will come out stronger." The applause was genuine but subdued. People were still processing the shock of learning that a company executive had been stealing from them. After the meeting, Simone's phone started ringing. Colleagues wanted to know if she had any inside information about what had happened. Reporters called asking for comments about the arrest. Even her family wanted details about the situation. She didn't tell anyone about her role in uncovering the fraud. The FBI had asked her to keep that confidential until the trial, and she was happy to comply. She didn't want the attention or the potential complications that might come from being publicly identified as the person who had brought down a criminal organization. That evening, she sat in her backyard with a glass of wine, reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken over the past year and a half. She had gone from being a discarded wife to being an executive who had uncovered a major financial crime. She had gone from being told she wasn't ambitious enough to being praised by FBI agents for her investigative skills. Most importantly, she had gone from defining herself through her relationship with James to building an identity based on her own accomplishments and values. The woman James had left behind, the woman he had dismissed as too practical and unambitious, had become someone powerful enough to bring down criminals and protect a company worth millions of dollars. She wondered if he had heard about David Sterling's arrest. She wondered if he understood the irony that his ex-wife, the woman he had considered too small-minded for his grand ambitions, was now making headlines for her role in a federal investigation. Not that it mattered what James thought anymore. She had more important things to focus on, like helping Sterling Industries recover from this betrayal and continuing to build the career she had discovered she was capable of. 3 weeks after David Sterling's arrest, Simone received a call that would reveal just how deep the conspiracy had gone. Agent Chin asked her to come to the FBI field office for another interview. When she arrived, she found Agent Rodriguez waiting with a stack of documents and a grim expression. "We've learned something that's going to interest you," Agent Chin said, gesturing for Simone to sit down. David Sterling wasn't just stealing from Sterling Industries. He was also selling confidential information to competitors. What kind of information? Client lists, pricing strategies, project details, internal communications. Basically, anything that would give competing firms an advantage in bidding against Sterling Industries. Agent Rodriguez opened one of the files. "We found evidence that he was working with someone at Meridian Consulting Group. They were paying him for inside information that helped them undercut Sterling Industries on several major contracts." Simone felt her stomach drop. Meridian Consulting Group was one of Sterling Industries' biggest competitors. The company had been losing contracts to them over the past year, with clients citing better pricing and more detailed proposals. Richard had been frustrated by their inability to compete, never suspecting that Meridian had inside information. "How much money are we talking about?" she asked. "In lost contracts? Probably $15 to $20 million over the past 18 months. The number was staggering. David Sterling hadn't just been stealing money directly. He had been systematically undermining the company's ability to compete, costing them clients and revenue that dwarfed even his direct theft. "There's something else," Agent Chin said. "We think David Sterling might have had an accomplice inside Sterling Industries. Someone with access to information he wouldn't normally have had." "Who?" "We're not sure yet. But some of the confidential documents he sold were from departments he had no legitimate reason to access. Someone was feeding him information." Simone thought about the implications. If there was another person inside the company working with David, they were still there, still potentially stealing information and undermining Sterling Industries' operations. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "We want you to help us identify who might have had access to the specific documents that were sold to Meridian. You know the company's systems better than anyone. You might be able to spot patterns we've missed." They gave her a list of confidential documents that had been found in David Sterling's possession. As she reviewed the list, something struck her as odd. Many of the documents were from her own department, including some that had been created after David's arrest. "These are recent," she said, pointing to several files on the list. "Some of these were created last week." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "Are you sure?" "Positive. This project proposal for the Harrison account was finalized 3 days ago. And this budget analysis was completed yesterday." The agents exchanged glances. "That means someone is still stealing information and passing it along, even after David's arrest. But David is in jail. How would he be getting current documents?" "He's not," Agent Chin said. "Someone else is continuing the operation." The revelation sent a chill through Simone. Not only was there another thief in the company, but they were someone with access to her department's most sensitive information. "I need to review the access logs for these documents," she said. "Find out who has been viewing or downloading them." "Can you do that without arousing suspicion?" Yes. As Executive Vice President, I have authorization to audit document access for security purposes. It's a normal part of my job. She spent the next 2 days conducting the most thorough security audit of her career. She tracked every access to the documents on the FBI's list, cross-referenced viewing times with employee schedules, and looked for patterns in the data. What she found shocked her more than David Sterling's original fraud. The person accessing the confidential documents wasn't someone she would have suspected. It wasn't someone with obvious financial motivations or signs of living beyond their means. It was Tom Rodriguez, the 15-year veteran who had questioned her qualifications when she first became operations manager. Tom had been viewing and downloading sensitive documents from multiple departments, always during off hours when fewer people were around to notice. He had access to the files because of his seniority and his role in coordinating between different project teams. But the access pattern showed something even more disturbing. Tom had been stealing information for years, long before David Sterling had joined the company. David hadn't corrupted Tom. Tom had been the original source of the leak, and he had recruited David into the conspiracy. Tom Rodriguez has been stealing from this company for at least 5 years, she told the FBI agents. David Sterling was the newcomer. Tom was the one running the operation. Agent Chin shook her head in amazement. A 15-year employee. Someone everyone trusted. That's what made him perfect for it, Simone said. No one would suspect the longtime employee who complained about promotions going to outsiders and asked tough questions about new policies. Everyone thought he was just being a loyal, cautious employee. Including you? Especially me. I thought he was skeptical of my promotion because he was protective of the company. Turns out he was worried I might be competent enough to catch him stealing. The irony was perfect. Tom had questioned her qualifications and challenged her authority because he was afraid she might actually be good at her job. His resistance to her leadership hadn't been about protecting the company's standards. It had been about protecting his own criminal operation. We need to arrest him before he realizes we're onto him, Agent Rodriguez said. How do you want to handle this? Simone asked. Same way we handled David Sterling. We'll coordinate with your CEO to make sure Tom doesn't get any warning, then move in during business hours. What should I do in the meantime? Act normal. Don't change your behavior around Tom or give him any reason to think you suspect him. We'll move as quickly as possible. Acting normal around Tom Rodriguez was even harder than it had been with David Sterling. At least David had been charming and seemingly harmless. Tom was someone she saw every day, someone who had been questioning her decisions and undermining her authority while stealing from the company she was trying to protect. During their staff meeting on Thursday morning, Tom made several comments about maintaining security and being careful about who has access to sensitive information. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was lecturing her about security while actively stealing confidential documents. You're right, Tom, she said calmly. Security is crucial. I've been doing some audits of our document access protocols, and I'm planning to implement some additional safeguards. She watched his face carefully as she said it, looking for any sign that he understood the threat. But Tom just nodded approvingly, apparently confident that his methods were too sophisticated to be detected. Friday morning, FBI agents arrested Tom Rodriguez at his desk while he was reviewing a confidential budget report that he had no legitimate reason to be reading. Unlike David Sterling, who had seemed shocked by his arrest, Tom appeared resigned, as if he had always known this day would come. The second arrest sent even bigger shockwaves through Sterling Industries than the first. David Sterling had been a relative newcomer, someone most employees barely knew. Tom Rodriguez was a fixture, someone who had been at the company longer than many of his colleagues. How many more are there? Richard asked Simone after Tom's arrest. How many other people have been stealing from us? I don't think there are any others, she said. The evidence suggests Tom was the ringleader and David was his primary accomplice. Everyone else seems to be clean. How can you be sure? I've audited every document access log, every financial transaction, every consultant payment for the past 5 years. If there were other conspirators, I would have found evidence by now. Richard nodded, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Learning that 2 of his employees had been systematically betraying his trust had taken a toll on him. The FBI thinks the total loss to the company is close to $40 million when you factor in the stolen money, the lost contracts, and the damage to our competitive position, he said. Can we recover any of it? Some maybe. David Sterling bought a lot of expensive toys with the money he stole. Cars, jewelry, art. We can seize those assets. But the information that was sold to our competitors, that damage is permanent. Simone thought about the clients they had lost, the contracts they had failed to win, the reputation damage that would follow the public revelation of the fraud. Sterling Industries would survive, but it would take years to fully recover from what Tom Rodriguez and David Sterling had done. "There is one positive outcome from all of this," Richard said. "What's that?" "We know now that our internal systems and oversight procedures work." "You caught them, Simone. Your diligence and attention to detail saved this company from even greater losses." "I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing much more than your job. You were protecting something you cared about. That's the difference between an employee and a leader." As she left Richard's office, Simone reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been a wife whose husband didn't respect her intelligence or ambition. Now she was an executive who had single-handedly uncovered a multi-million-dollar fraud conspiracy. The woman James had dismissed as too practical and unambitious had become someone powerful enough to bring down a criminal organization and save a company. She wondered if Tom Rodriguez had ever realized the irony. He had spent months questioning her qualifications and challenging her authority, never understanding that he was dealing with someone smart enough and determined enough to destroy him. Sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who brings you down. 2 months after Tom Rodriguez's arrest, Simone was working late when she received a phone call that would reveal the most shocking connection of all. It was Agent Chin, and her voice carried an urgency that made Simone's stomach tighten. "We need to meet," Agent Chin said. "Tonight if possible. There's been a development in the Sterling Industries case that you need to know about." They met at a coffee shop near Simone's house. Agent Chin looked tired, like she had been working around the clock, and she carried a thick folder that she set carefully on the table between them. "We've been tracing the money trail from Tom Rodriguez and David Sterling's operation," she began. "Following where the stolen funds went, how they were laundered, who else might have been involved." "Did you find more conspirators?" "In a way, yes. But not at Sterling Industries." Agent Chin opened the folder. "We found something that's going to be difficult for you to hear." Simone felt a chill of premonition. "What is it?" "Your ex-husband, James Washington, has been receiving payments from one of the shell companies connected to this fraud ring." The words hit Simone like a physical blow. She stared at Agent Chin, trying to process what she had just heard. "That's impossible," she said finally. "James works for a completely different company. He has nothing to do with Sterling Industries anymore. He's been receiving monthly payments of $5,000 from Phoenix Strategic Solutions for the past 8 months, Agent Chin said, sliding a bank statement across the table. "The same fake company that David Sterling was using to steal money from your company." Simone looked at the bank statement, seeing James's name and account number clearly printed next to regular deposits from Phoenix Strategic Solutions. The amounts were smaller than the payments David Sterling had been making to himself, but they were consistent and ongoing. "What was he doing for the money?" she asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out. We know he was in contact with Tom Rodriguez, because we found phone records showing regular calls between them. But we don't know exactly what information or services James was providing. James doesn't have access to Sterling Industries information. He works for Hartwell and Associates now." "Hartwell and Associates is one of Sterling Industries' major competitors," Agent Chin pointed out. "If James was passing along information about Hartwell's strategies, pricing, or client approaches, that would be valuable to someone trying to manipulate the bidding process." The implications were staggering. James hadn't just left her for another woman. He had gotten involved with criminals who were stealing from her company. The monthly payments from Phoenix Strategic Solutions had been funding his new lifestyle with Catherine, the lifestyle he had said he deserved. "How long have you known about this?" Simone asked. "We just discovered it yesterday. James's name came up when we were tracing the bank accounts associated with Phoenix Strategic Solutions. We're still investigating the full extent of his involvement." "Are you going to arrest him?" "We need to understand what he was doing first. The payments could be for legitimate consulting services, though given the source that seems unlikely. Or he could be another victim, someone Tom Rodriguez was using without James realizing he was part of a criminal operation." Simone thought about James, about his complaints that he wasn't earning enough money, that their life wasn't impressive enough. Had his dissatisfaction made him vulnerable to Tom Rodriguez's recruitment? Had he been desperate enough for extra income that he hadn't asked too many questions about where it was coming from? "What do you need from me?" she asked. "We want to know if James ever asked you questions about Sterling Industries after your divorce. Did he show unusual interest in your work, ask about specific clients or projects, try to get information he shouldn't have had access to?" Simone thought back to their few interactions since the divorce. They had barely spoken except about logistics, dividing their possessions, handling the paperwork, dealing with joint accounts. James had seemed eager to cut all ties with her and their old life together. "He never asked me about work," she said. "He seemed to want nothing to do with Sterling Industries or anything connected to our marriage." What about before the divorce? In the months leading up to his leaving? That gave Simone pause. She remembered James working late more often, taking phone calls he said were work-related, asking occasional questions about her job that had seemed like polite interest at the time. "He did ask about some things," she said slowly, "but I thought he was just making conversation, trying to show interest in my work because I had complained that he never seemed to care about what I did." "What kind of things did he ask about?" "Client names, project timelines, budget information. Things I thought were general questions but—" She trailed off as the pieces fell into place. "Things that would be useful to someone trying to undercut our bids." Agent Chin nodded grimly. "We think Tom Rodriguez recruited James months before James left you. The affair with Catherine Williams, the dissatisfaction with his marriage, the desire for a more expensive lifestyle, Tom might have exploited all of that to turn James into an asset." "You think Tom Rodriguez orchestrated James leaving me?" "It's possible. If James was feeding information to Tom about Sterling Industries' strategies and capabilities, having him stay married to you would have been valuable. You were Lisa Chen's assistant then, with access to high-level strategic information. Through you, James could have provided intelligence that was worth far more than $5,000 a month." The revelation was devastating. Not just that James had been involved with criminals, but that his entire relationship with Catherine, his dissatisfaction with their marriage, his complaints about her lack of ambition, all of it might have been manufactured or manipulated as part of a criminal conspiracy. When James got promoted and moved to a different company, he would have lost his access to Sterling Industries information through you, Agent Chin continued. That might explain why the payments to him didn't start until after he left. Tom Rodriguez might have found a different way to use him. What kind of way? Industrial espionage. Having someone inside a competing firm who could provide information about their strategies, their weaknesses, their client relationships. James could have been feeding Tom information about Hartwell and Associates that helped manipulate the competitive landscape. Simone felt sick. The man she had loved, the man she had supported through school and celebrated every success with, had been betraying her and her company for money. Worse, his betrayal might have been the real reason for the end of their marriage. "I need to know something," she said. "The timeline of when James started complaining about our marriage, when he met Catherine, when he became dissatisfied with our lifestyle, does any of that correspond with when Tom Rodriguez might have recruited him?" Agent Chin flipped through the folder. Based on the phone records, the first contact between James and Tom Rodriguez was 14 months ago. When did James start acting differently? "About 14 months ago," Simone said quietly. "That's when he started working late more often, when he started complaining that we should have nicer things, when he started asking questions about my work." "And when did he meet Catherine Williams?" "About 12 months ago." Agent Chin made a note. "So Tom Rodriguez recruited James, James started gathering information from you, and then 2 months later he met the woman he would eventually leave you for. You think Tom Rodriguez introduced them?" "It's possible. Catherine Williams is a wealthy widow with connections throughout the business community. If Tom Rodriguez wanted to provide James with a lifestyle that would make him more willing to participate in criminal activities, introducing him to Catherine would have been perfect." The pieces were falling into place in a way that made Simone's head spin. Her marriage hadn't fallen apart because James was naturally dissatisfied or because they had grown apart. It had been destroyed as part of a criminal conspiracy designed to exploit her access to confidential information. "Does Catherine Williams know about any of this?" she asked. "We don't think so. She appears to be an innocent victim in this situation. Tom Rodriguez might have manipulated her introduction to James without her knowing she was being used." "What happens now?" "We're going to arrest James tomorrow morning. We have enough evidence to charge him with conspiracy, fraud, and corporate espionage. Whether Catherine Williams was involved or just another victim, we'll determine during the investigation." Simone sat in the coffee shop for a long time after Agent Chin left, trying to process everything she had learned. Her marriage, her divorce, the pain of being abandoned, all of it had been orchestrated by Tom Rodriguez as part of a criminal operation. James hadn't left her because she wasn't ambitious enough or because Catherine was more impressive. He had left her because Tom Rodriguez had needed him to have a different lifestyle and different connections to be more useful as a criminal asset. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. Tom Rodriguez had destroyed her marriage to make James more useful for stealing from Sterling Industries. But by doing so, he had freed Simone to focus entirely on her career, which had led to her promotion, which had given her access to the financial information that allowed her to catch Tom Rodriguez and bring down his entire operation. Tom Rodriguez had unknowingly created the person who would destroy him. She drove home slowly, thinking about all the nights she had lain awake wondering what she had done wrong, why James had stopped loving her, how she could have been a better wife. Now she knew the truth. There was nothing she could have done differently. Her marriage had been sabotaged by a criminal who saw her husband as a useful asset and her as an obstacle to be removed. The next morning, James Washington was arrested at his office at Hartwell and Associates. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, corporate espionage, and money laundering. The arrest made the local news, though the reporters didn't yet understand the full scope of the criminal operation or how it connected to the previous arrests at Sterling Industries. Richard Brennan called Simone into his office that afternoon. "I heard about your ex-husband's arrest," he said gently. "I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." "I'm still processing it," she admitted. "Learning that your entire marriage was essentially a criminal operation is a lot. Do you need time off? I would understand if you wanted to step back from work while you deal with this. Actually, work is the only thing keeping me sane right now. If I stop moving, stop focusing on something productive, I think I'll fall apart." Richard nodded. "I understand that feeling. Work can be a refuge when everything else in your life feels chaotic." "There's something else," Simone said. "I want you to know that I never gave James any confidential information knowingly. If he was gathering intelligence about Sterling Industries through me, he was doing it without my knowledge or consent." "I never doubted that for a second," Richard said firmly. "You're the person who uncovered this entire conspiracy. You're the reason we caught them before they could steal even more. Your loyalty to this company has never been in question." "Thank you. That means more than you know." "There's something I want to discuss with you," Richard said. "The board has been talking about how to move forward after everything that's happened. We're going to be implementing new security protocols, new oversight procedures, new safeguards to prevent this kind of fraud from happening again." "That makes sense. We want you to head up that effort. We're creating a new position, Chief Security Officer, that would put you in charge of all aspects of corporate security, from physical security to information security to financial oversight. It would be a promotion with a salary increase to match the expanded responsibilities." Simone stared at him. "You want me to be Chief Security Officer? You've proven that you have the skills, the attention to detail, and the dedication to protect this company. You caught criminals that law enforcement and professional auditors had missed. You saved Sterling Industries from potentially catastrophic losses. What would the salary be? $350,000 plus bonuses. You'd report directly to me and have a seat on the executive committee. $350,000. More money than she had ever imagined earning, for a job that would make her one of the most powerful people in the company. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it. Take your time." "But Simone, I want you to know that this offer has nothing to do with sympathy for what you've been through personally. This is about recognizing exceptional talent and giving you the role you've already proven you can handle." That evening, Simone sat in her backyard with a glass of wine, thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. 2 years ago, she had been a wife whose husband thought she lacked ambition. Now she was being offered a position that would make her one of the highest-paid executives in the industry. James had left her because Tom Rodriguez had convinced him that she was holding him back from success. Now Tom Rodriguez was in federal prison, James was facing years in jail, and she was being offered a job that would pay more than both of them had ever earned combined. Sometimes justice had a sense of humor that was too perfect to be accidental. The trial of Tom Rodriguez, David Sterling, and James Washington began 6 months later. Simone was the prosecution's star witness, the person whose investigation had uncovered the conspiracy and whose testimony would explain to the jury exactly how the defendants had stolen millions of dollars and betrayed the trust of everyone around them. She spent 3 days on the witness stand, walking the jury through her financial analysis, explaining how she had traced the fraudulent payments, and describing the systematic way the defendants had exploited their positions to steal money and sell confidential information. The hardest part was testifying about James. She had to explain how her ex-husband had used their marriage to gather intelligence about Sterling Industries, how he had asked seemingly innocent questions that were actually fishing expeditions for information that could be sold to competitors. "Mrs. Washington," the prosecutor said during her testimony, Did you ever suspect that your husband was using information you shared about your work for criminal purposes? No, she said clearly. I thought he was finally taking an interest in my career. For years he had seemed uninterested in what I did at work. When he started asking questions, I was happy that he seemed to care. How do you feel about being deceived in this way? The defense attorney objected, and the judge sustained it, but the question hung in the air anyway. How did she feel about learning that her marriage had been destroyed as part of a criminal conspiracy? I feel like I was used, she said when the prosecutor rephrased the question. Not just by my husband but by all three defendants. They saw me as a source of information, not as a person. They were willing to destroy my marriage and my happiness to make their criminal operation more profitable. When James's defense attorney cross-examined her, he tried to suggest that she might have known more than she was admitting, that she might have been a willing participant who was now trying to avoid responsibility. Isn't it true, Mrs. Washington, that you were experiencing financial difficulties in your marriage? He asked. We were living within our means, but we weren't wealthy, if that's what you're asking. And your husband was dissatisfied with your lifestyle? He wanted more expensive things than we could afford on our salaries. So when he started earning additional income, that must have been welcome news. I didn't know he was earning additional income through criminal activities, Simone said firmly. If I had known he was stealing money and selling confidential information, I would have reported him to the authorities immediately. But you did know he was suddenly able to afford things he couldn't afford before? By the time his spending increased significantly, he had already left me for another woman. I assumed his new girlfriend was paying for his lifestyle. The attorney tried several more approaches, but Simone's testimony remained consistent and credible. She had been a victim of the conspiracy, not a participant in it. During a break in the trial, she saw James in the hallway outside the courtroom. He looked older than she remembered, and the expensive clothes Tom Rodriguez's money had bought him had been replaced by a simple suit that looked borrowed. Simone, he said, approaching her carefully, can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to hurt you. She looked at him, this man she had once loved, this man who had destroyed their marriage for money and then destroyed his own life for the same reason. You took money to spy on my company, James. You gathered information from me under false pretenses and sold it to criminals. You helped steal millions of dollars from the place where I work. How is that not meant to hurt me? I didn't know what Tom was really doing when it started, James said desperately. He told me he was just gathering market intelligence, that it was normal competitive research. By the time I realized it was criminal, I was already in too deep. When did you realize it was criminal? James was quiet for a long moment. When David Sterling got arrested. That's when I understood that Tom wasn't just gathering information. He was stealing money and manipulating contracts. And you kept taking the payments for 2 more months after David's arrest. I was scared. Tom said if I stopped helping him, he would tell everyone that I had been involved from the beginning. He said he would make it look like I was the mastermind and he was just following my instructions. Simone felt a flicker of the sympathy she had once felt for this man, but it was overshadowed by the magnitude of what he had done. You could have come to me, she said. When you realized what was happening, you could have told me the truth. I could have helped you figure out how to handle it legally. I was ashamed. And I was afraid you would hate me. I hate you more for lying than I ever would have for telling the truth. James nodded, looking defeated. I know. I made the wrong choice at every step. I destroyed our marriage for money that was stolen. I betrayed you and your company because I was greedy and weak. I threw away everything good in my life for something that was fake. Yes, you did. I'm sorry, Simone. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I'm truly sorry for what I did to you. She looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once been her husband, who had once been someone she trusted completely. I forgive you, James, she said finally. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger around is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy. Thank you, he said, and she could see tears in his eyes. But I want you to understand something. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Richard Brennan, who trusted you with his son-in-law. You hurt Sterling Industries employees, whose jobs were put at risk by your theft. You hurt Catherine Williams, who fell in love with someone who was using her. The damage you did goes far beyond our marriage. I know. I think about that every day. Good. You should. That was the last conversation she ever had with James Washington. The jury convicted all 3 defendants on all charges. Tom Rodriguez received 15 years in federal prison. David Sterling received 12 years. James received 8 years. which his attorney said was reduced because of his cooperation with the investigation and his expression of genuine remorse. Simone felt no satisfaction in seeing James sentenced to prison. She felt no joy in his downfall or vindication in his punishment. She felt only a sense of closure, a feeling that a difficult chapter of her life was finally, completely finished. After the trial, she accepted Richard Brennan's offer to become Chief Security Officer of Sterling Industries. Her first initiative was implementing a comprehensive security protocol that would prevent the kind of systematic fraud Tom Rodriguez had orchestrated. Her second initiative was creating an anonymous reporting system that would allow employees to report suspicious activities without fear of retaliation. 6 months later, Sterling Industries had recovered most of the clients they had lost to Meridian Consulting Group. The company's reputation had been strengthened rather than damaged by their decisive response to the fraud. Potential clients saw Sterling Industries as a company that took security seriously and dealt with problems transparently. Simone's role as Chief Security Officer made her a sought-after speaker at industry conferences and a consultant for other companies looking to strengthen their own security protocols. She had become exactly what James had accused her of not being: ambitious, successful, and influential in the business world. The difference was that she had achieved success through competence and integrity rather than through theft and deception. 1 year after the trial, Simone was invited to speak at the National Conference on Corporate Security. Her presentation on detecting internal fraud had become a case study taught in business schools, and her methods were being adopted by companies across the country. As she stood at the podium looking out at an audience of executives, security professionals, and law enforcement officers, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she had been an executive assistant whose husband thought she lacked ambition. Today, she was one of the most respected security experts in the industry. The most important lesson I learned from the Sterling Industries case, she told the audience, is that criminals count on being underestimated. Tom Rodriguez succeeded for years because he presented himself as a loyal, cautious employee who was just looking out for the company's interests. David Sterling succeeded because he seemed charming and harmless. They counted on people seeing what they wanted to see rather than what was actually there. After her presentation, she was approached by a woman from the FBI's white-collar crime division. "Ms. Washington, I'm Agent Patricia Hayes. I've been following your work since the Sterling Industries case, and I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in consulting for us on corporate fraud investigations." "What kind of consulting?" "We're seeing more sophisticated fraud schemes every year. Criminals are getting better at hiding their activities, and traditional auditing methods aren't always enough to catch them. We need people who understand both the business side and the investigative side. People like you." The offer was intriguing. Working with the FBI would allow her to help other companies avoid what Sterling Industries had gone through. It would also mean expanding her skills and taking on new challenges. "I'd be interested in hearing more," she said. "Excellent. I'll have our director reach out to you next week." That evening, Simone had dinner with Lisa Chin, who had become not just a former boss but a close friend and mentor. "So you're thinking about working with the FBI?" Lisa asked. "Part-time consulting. I'd keep my position at Sterling Industries, but I'd also help with federal investigations when they need someone with corporate security experience." "That sounds perfect for you. You've always been someone who wants to make a difference, and this would let you protect companies across the country instead of just one." They were eating at the same expensive restaurant where Simone had celebrated her first major client as operations manager 2 years earlier. This time she wasn't dining alone. She had built a network of friends and colleagues who respected her work and enjoyed her company. "Can I ask you something?" Lisa said. "Do you ever think about dating again? It's been 3 years since your divorce." Simone considered the question. She had been so focused on rebuilding her career and her life that romance had seemed like a distraction she couldn't afford. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I'm in no hurry. I'm finally comfortable with who I am and what I want from life. I don't want to compromise that unless I find someone who adds to my happiness rather than requiring me to diminish myself." "That's very wise. And very different from how you approached relationships before." "Before, I thought being a good partner meant supporting someone else's dreams even if it meant giving up my own. Now I understand that the right person will support my dreams as much as I support theirs." "Have you heard anything about James lately?" "He's still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole in 4 years if he maintains good behavior." Simone paused. "I don't think about him much anymore. He feels like someone I knew in a different life." "What about Catherine Williams?" "She started a foundation for women who've been victims of financial fraud. She speaks at conferences about how to recognize when someone is using you for your money or connections. I think what happened to her was a wake-up call about being more careful with trust. It sounds like everyone learned something from this experience. Everyone except Tom Rodriguez, probably. Some people never take responsibility for the damage they cause. As they left the restaurant, Simone felt a deep sense of contentment with her life. She had work that mattered, friends who valued her, and a future full of possibilities she was excited to explore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Saw your conference presentation online. So proud of you." Mom and Dad watched it twice and Dad cried both times. She smiled, thinking about her family's reaction to her success. They had always believed in her, even when she had stopped believing in herself. The next week, she met with FBI Director Sarah Chin, no relation to her former colleague, about the consulting opportunity. The meeting went well, and within a month she was working on her first federal case, a complex fraud scheme involving multiple companies and millions of dollars in stolen funds. Her expertise in tracing financial irregularities and understanding corporate systems made her an invaluable asset to the investigation team. Within 6 months, they had identified the perpetrators and recovered most of the stolen money. "You have a real gift for this work," Director Chin told her after the case was resolved. "Have you ever considered a career change? We could use someone with your skills full-time." The offer was tempting, but Simone had found her perfect balance at Sterling Industries. She enjoyed the consulting work with the FBI, but she also loved her role as chief security officer and the team she had built there. "I'm happy with the consulting arrangement," she said. "It gives me the best of both worlds." 6 months later, Simone was featured on the cover of Corporate Security magazine as Executive of the Year. The article detailed her investigation of the Sterling Industries fraud and her subsequent work helping other companies strengthen their security protocols. Richard Brennan framed the magazine cover and hung it in the Sterling Industries lobby. "I want everyone who enters this building to see what real leadership looks like," he told her. That evening, Simone sat in her backyard garden, reading the magazine article about her life and career. The journalist had done thorough research, interviewing colleagues, FBI agents, and industry experts about her work. "Simone Washington represents a new kind of corporate security professional," the article concluded. "She combines technical expertise with investigative instincts and the kind of ethical foundation that makes her incorruptible. Companies across the country are implementing the security protocols she developed, and law enforcement agencies seek her consultation on their most complex cases. She has turned personal betrayal into professional triumph, and in doing so has made the business world safer for everyone." As she finished reading, Simone thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, insecure, defined by her relationship to someone else, afraid to reach for more than what seemed safe and reasonable. That woman was gone, replaced by someone confident, accomplished, and respected in her field. Someone who had turned the worst betrayal of her life into the foundation of unprecedented success. James had left her because he thought she wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't impressive enough, wasn't enough. He had been wrong about all of it, but his leaving had freed her to discover what she was truly capable of. Tom Rodriguez had destroyed her marriage because he saw her as an obstacle to his criminal operation. He had been wrong too. She wasn't an obstacle to be removed. She was the force that would ultimately destroy him. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most end up giving you the greatest gifts. They force you to prove them wrong, and in doing so, you discover strengths you never knew you had. Simone Washington had become exactly who she was meant to be. And she had done it not despite the betrayal she had suffered, but because of them. She was finally, completely, triumphantly herself.